Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kevin Galetz, and I am a program facilitator working with the Regina District Industry Education Council in the Sun West School Division. Today it's my pleasure to introduce Janine Wagar, who is a registered dietitian. Janine's a former student of mine. She's a graduate of Rosetown Central High School. And during her presentation, we'll learn more about what the occupation is about and the training path that Janine took to get to where she is today. So just a reminder before we begin, this session is being recorded and will appear on the RDIEC YouTube channel for you or others to watch in the future. And just go to the RDIEC website at www.rdiec.ca to find the YouTube channel. So thanks for taking time to do this today, Janine, and I'll turn it over to you.
Sounds great. Yeah, so the technical title is Registered Dietitian or Dietitian. That's my job title. I do have two different jobs, but Registered Dietitian, which I'll kind of get into it in the slides coming, but it is actually different than like a nutritionist. So some people kind of get confused. They call me a nutritionist, but the job title and description is actually a Registered Dietitian. And so my two part-time jobs that I cover right now is the community dietitian through the Saskatchewan Health Authority, which again, I'll kind of get into like the logistics of what the community dietitian really entails. And then my other part-time job is a dietitian and program facilitator at Bridgepoint Center for Eating Disorder Recovery, which I'll explain kind of where those places are. So my job description and duties in the Saskatchewan Health Authority. So when I was making this presentation, I was kind of like, cool, I feel like I'm all over the place. And it's basically because my job at Saskatchewan Health Authority is a little bit unique because it's in a rural setting. So I kind of like touch upon this throughout the presentation about it's kind of like there's good parts to that, there's bad parts to it, but essentially I cover all aspects of dietetics in the communities that I cover. So yeah, I was trying to kind of explain like exactly what I do. And sometimes I even confuse myself. And honestly, my own family is like, what do you do for your work? And so basically I am like the community dietitian. And so, but I'm also the only dietitian that is in Rosetown, Bigger, Kyle, and Elrose. Those are the communities that I cover. So I'm the only employed dietitian there. And so basically the job description is just completing nutrition assessments and screenings on patients. But I also have to cover acute care. So your acute care is like basically when you're in hospital, long-term care facilities, and then the patients that are living in the community. And I'll kind of touch upon a little bit about what screenings are and like the nutrition assessments and whatnot. But that's basically what happens. I show up in the morning, I have my little like mail slot. I basically see people based on referrals that come into me. So either like by doctors or nurses or other health professionals who refer to me. I'll have my little stack of referrals and I see them, and yeah, they're kind of spread out throughout. Like I'll have one from that's in the hospital, I have one in long-term care, and then I have a few that I need to call and they need to come in to see me as like an outpatient in my office. And so that is a little bit unique for rural settings because in larger cities, in the hospitals, each unit kind of has like a dietitian, and so you are covering strictly clinical, or the long-term care facilities have their own dietitians. But I'm not exactly sure the history of why it was kind of like, hey, there's a dietitian and she's sitting in an office down in community and she can cover acute care. I'm not sure kind of how our positions morphed into that, but yeah, so I cover kind of all areas of that. And I do cover a little bit of food service as well. So we do food service training in university. And so basically that's like the kitchens that are at the health facilities. And so a lot of the times when we're preparing food for the patients, there's lots of kind of concerns that come up in the food service facilities. recently, I can't remember exactly when, there was a new position created that was a food service manager that was not in our area before, and she's kind of taken over, and I've gladly kind of handed off the food service issues because I'm just stretched too thin. So I don't cover as much food service right now, but again, I'll kind of touch upon like what the duties are in food service. And then different presentations. So our mandate is kind of that we're supposed to see like the patients and residents that are in the health facilities, but we can cover outside community groups. So I've done like presentations on nutrition to support groups. I've done presentations to like, there was a bank once that just wanted to kind of do a lunch and learn. We've done partnerships with different groups like the former GMAX egg team. We kind of did a partnership with them and did cooking classes. So there's a really wide variety of different nutrition presentations that I've had or have been requested to do. The dietitian is responsible for providing nutrition education based on the specific needs of the patient. So basically that's my job is nutrition, like the title of nutrition is very, very broad. And so it covers a lot of different areas. And so I just kind of thought on this slide, I would explain just a few examples of like every, on like a day-to-day, what kind of patients I would help with. And so like the first one is patients who are unable to eat or drink. So we wouldn't necessarily have someone in Rosetown that's in a coma because they have to be more stable to be out in the Rosetown hospital. But in large centers, obviously, if you are unable to physically eat or drink, you still obviously need nutrients in order to live. So the dietitian is then responsible for basically calculating out, it's kind of neat actually, it's a little bag that obviously it's tube feeding, so it's a little bag that the tube would then go into either your nose or your stomach or actually straight into your blood. And as a dietitian, I actually calculate out kind of what formula specifically would meet the patient's needs. So the doctors actually don't really have much say in that. They have to sign off, obviously, when I kind of say, hey, I think it should be this formula at this rate going into the patient. And so out in Rosetown, we do actually get feed patients. Obviously, they're just more alert and awake and they're not able to eat for other reasons. And so that would be kind of one example of patients I see. Another example would be just those that are diagnosed with a disease that affects kind of the food choices. So, for example, diabetes or celiac.
Can I interrupt you, Janine?
Yes.
Your voice is cutting in and out a little bit.
Shoot.
So maybe just try to stay closer to, I don't know where the mic is.
Okay.
That's all.
Okay.
That's good.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so like diabetes obviously is going to affect the patient's health and their food choices. So I would help kind of navigate making sure that they're still balancing their meals, getting in the right nutrients based on kind of their specific diagnosis. Another example, I added a little picture of my little girl just because I do a lot of education helping new parents understand kind of how to feed their babies. And because I've experienced it firsthand on how overwhelming it can be to kind of not know what to feed your child. And so, you know, I included this just for an example of it, like, you know, to most, it kind of just looks simply like a child eating. But to me, it's like I educate the parents on it's like seating positions, when they're ready for solid foods, what to feed them. There's lots of allergens that need to be introduced at specific times, important nutrients that babies need to be kind of supplemented with or focused on, safety and choking hazards. So you can't just all of a sudden give a baby an apple. So I go through like kind of every detail about feeding your child. So that's another example of kind of what I do. And then another example would just be then, so I can literally see someone with diabetes, see someone with a tube feed in the hospital, then I see a mom wanting information on how to feed her kid, and then I run to long-term care. And the majority of long-term care, I would say, would be pressure ulcers. So obviously in long-term care, when residents are kind of unable to move the same. They're kind of sitting in the same positions. They are at risk for like pressure wounds. So nutrition has a very important role in either preventing the wounds or healing them. So that's just kind of, I just wanted to include just examples of how the dietitian fits in, because sometimes people are like, what does the dietitian even do in the hospital? And then at Bridgepoint Center for Eating Disorder Recovery, my job out there is basically we do group sessions. So there's different components of the program. They're out there. It's a residential facility, essentially meaning that they are living out there for the time that they are out there, whether it's 4 days or 21 days. And so there's obviously different components, but I would facilitate the nutrition components. And then I'd also provide one-on-one support. So whenever we are not in group, they would just schedule to see the dietitian, like to kind of have more in-depth conversations with kind of what's going on with them. Provide kitchen and menu support. I kind of don't do a ton of that, but if there is ever like concerns with making sure the menu is balanced and stuff like that, I will be the person that they can call on for that. Provide meal support, so we don't technically break at lunch. We eat with the participants because obviously with eating disorders, mealtime itself can provide a lot of learning, and obviously there's individuals struggle a lot at mealtimes, so I facilitate that. And then Bridgepoint Center actually, I think throughout COVID, they went online, and then they've been able to get funding to continue that aspect of their program. So I do a lot of like online groups. And then I present to various groups and associations. So like we've been requested from actually a lot of schools, if there was just a classroom that the teacher was kind of concerned that there was lots of students that were struggling, or if schools just wanted to know like kind of what the options for eating disorder recovery are, because there's not a lot out there. So we just present on that. And yeah, and I included some pictures because it's a great place to work, because I am part of the nutrition components, but because we don't do nutrition all day and my shift is like 8 hours long or 10 hours long, I actually get to experience a lot of the other programming parts. And so we do equine therapy, which is like working with horses. I'm not trained in that, but my coworkers are. So I get to help facilitate groups there. I get to do like yoga out there with the participants. We take the participants for like grocery store tours. So it's really not every day is the same for sure out there. So skills and traits. So I would say the majority of like what I do is working with people. So a strong interpersonal skills, like just basically basic people skills is probably required. Strong public speaking skills. So I always chuckle when I say this, because my job is basically to talk in front of groups, in front of people. I do tons of presentations in different settings. And I was in grade 7. I still will never forget Mrs. Smith. She let me present my book reports after class because I had like crippling anxiety to public speak, and I literally couldn't do it. So I just kind of chuckle now that I'm in a profession that I do it for a living. Obviously, the more you do it, the more you get comfortable. And I basically was just forced to just be comfortable with it throughout school. So strong public speaking skills, ability to work in teams. So I work in teams at both of my jobs. Like health is so like intertwined. And so I work alongside occupational therapists, nurses, doctors, mental health, a lot of the times, issues with the patients overlap. So a strong ability to work in teams is definitely required. Creativity helps with doing like your group sessions or presenting, because it's just a lot of presenting in this job. Compassion is a necessity. So I always say like food is definitely more than just fuel, and food issues are very complex. And so having compassion without judgment is very, very crucial in order to be a good dietitian. Because I mean, for example, like if I'm telling somebody, protein options and telling them to increase their protein when their family's just literally struggling to get any food on the table. Yeah, like just understanding that issues with food is very complex, and so compassion's definitely important. And in general, which I kind of will touch upon this, but food and nutrition is basically like science, biology, chemistry, so a desire to work in those areas is helpful. My journey, which I'll explain in the slide, but I avoided basically all chemistry when I first went into university. And then when I decided that I wanted to be a dietitian, I realized, oh, that's a lot what nutrition is. And so I have obviously learned to like it, but it is a lot of like, I didn't actually put here, but like calculations, a lot of calculations and everything. But yeah, I actually do enjoy it now. So these are the two facilities that I work at. So obviously Rosetown Hospital, I only got a picture of that, but I do cover other sites as well, but basically just the hospital. And then Bridgepoint is a actual old hospital. It's out in Milden. And so it was a hospital, it was shut down, and they transformed it into an eating disorder place. So that's where I work. And then I just kind of explained this already, that like my facilities, yes, are at the hospital, but within the communities, I cover long-term care sites. And then I do a bit of like private groups. Like there's some communities, like especially in bigger, but they have private kind of care groups or group homes. And they have some tube feed residents. So I will always kind of cover that. I've already mentioned about in rural settings, it's very, very common to cover multiple towns because there's like the dietitians, there's not a lot of positions out in rural. So I do cover multiple facilities and travel, which I mean, the travel time is included in my job. So it's actually, I don't mind it. And yeah, just being able to travel kind of through Bridgepoint too, like the facilities I work at, it's like I'm able to travel kind of across the province. And then, yeah, I've already explained where Bridgepoint is. So equipment used, when this came up, I was like, I don't know if I use any equipment. I have my laptop and I take my printed handouts and my assessment papers and a pen. And that's basically like 95% of what I use in my job. Laptop, I wouldn't be able to like function without my laptop. The one time I didn't bring a charger once and I was like, I don't know how to do my job without a laptop. And so it's very important, obviously, like we have like electronic medical records. So if I'm able to, I use it for like looking up somebody's blood work if they just got blood work done, especially in diabetes. That's all I basically do with patients is review their recent blood work. Presentations at Bridgepoint is just basically like a smart board and me writing things down. So it's pretty basic there. And virtual care, obviously, I need a laptop again. And then I have the next slide, I just kind of have some pictures of, I guess, like some equipment that I would use that I have like kind of in my office, which I'll explain. But I kind of was, thinking about this when I was writing it out. And I'm like, it's kind of interesting because I think what most people would think a dietitian uses every day is a scale in their office. Surprisingly, actually, I use a scale very little, if not at all. I don't know if I've used my scale in the last year or two of working. And so, which is actually like a great thing, I think. We've kind of slowly shifted our focus on weight. We've had, research that's come out that we've kind of said, okay, maybe weight actually isn't as important as we once thought it was. And it's not like the most important thing. So I just kind of found that interesting, that I was like, if I was, a student and I had to say like, what equipment would dietitians use? I just kind of pictured in my head what I would have thought. And it's like, a scale in the office, but I actually don't use one. So this is just kind of pictures of things that I do have in my office. So like food molds, they kind of look like play food, which essentially that's what it is. But this example is we have some molds that those are actually pureed foods. So that would be like pureed carrots. And then in long-term care, they're kind of showing that it's kind of important for the residents to still understand that they're eating carrots instead of just like orange mush being sent to them. And so there's like some molds that, which we actually don't use this. I would love for us in Saskatchewan to do this, but we don't. But this picture is the carrots that you would then just like mold it back in, or I've used it just to kind of show like the proper size of food that kind of should be served for residents and whatnot. And then the other picture is actually just a syringe, and it's just kind of explaining that a lot of the times I'll go do in-servicing or like education to different, mostly long-term care facilities, and it would just basically be like, there's different levels on if you need to have thickened fluids. So there's some residents that thin water is not safe for them to drink because it just goes down too quick, and then it aspirates, or they aspirate on it. So they need to have their water thickened. And so there's different levels of thickness. So the syringe kind of is basically you time how fast the liquid goes through the syringe. So, I mean, this really helps with like audits and stuff, which I'm not a huge part in that. I've never done one, but I mean, if they have like pre-thickened water in their fridge, you could go quickly do the tester to kind of make sure that it's thickened properly. And then the other things we work very closely with diabetes drug reps. And so they basically hand us and mail us a ton of glucose monitors, like your blood sugar reading monitors, and these Libres that basically, if you ever see someone having like a little sticker on the back of their arm, that's usually reading their blood sugars. And so I would basically, a lot of my job is doing education on how they work, because there's different brands and how you hook them up to your phone and all of that stuff. So rewards are definitely, I find it a privilege to be able to be a part of everyone's journey with food and their relationship with food. I remember in university once I had heard the term relationship with food, and I thought, well, that is like the cheesiest term I've ever heard. And I use it all the time now, but it is true, because I mean, we all eat, every single one of us eats. So basically, if you eat food, you know, a dietitian can be part of your journey. And I get to be a part of either like helping develop relationships with food at an early age, or help heal the relationships with food. And that's, with that being said, the next point about working with every age group. So I work with people that, you know, babies that aren't even born yet, that are in their mom's stomach still, and how to make sure that while moms are, you know, pregnant, they're getting in the right nutrients, all the way to like the end stage of life. So that's definitely super rewarding. Healthcare in general is just very rewarding, and it's important work, which I'll kind of get into my journey about why I wanted to be in healthcare, and how I chose nutrition. And then what I really like about my job is, you know, in healthcare right now, you know, doctors can't spend a ton of time with patients. And so a lot of the times people are, you know, have an appointment with the doctor and they say, you have diabetes or you have celiac disease. And they're stretched thin, and they don't have the time to sit down and kind of go through everything with them. So what I find really rewarding is like, I see patients come sit down at my desk, and just like, they are so anxious. They like almost, a lot of them are actually in tears. And then as I explain to them kind of like everything about their diagnosis and food and nutrients and all of that, like I can just literally see like the weight lift off their shoulders, and just feeling supported by myself is just, yeah, rewarding. In the eating disorder field, because there is very little research, there's very little support out there, kind of nationwide. At Bridgepoint, I see a lot of people come to the facility with very, very little hope. They've lost all hope. They've tried, you know, to kind of get better, and nothing's really worked, and they feel very hopeless. And Bridgepoint is very rewarding, because I feel like the their hope back, definitely. And it's a great place to work. Food and nutrition is applicable in all aspects of life. So that's what I find very rewarding is, nutrition. Well, no education is wasteful, I don't think. And so what I really like about nutrition is I use it in my everyday life all the time. My friends are constantly asking me questions about nutrition because it's not necessarily just for patients in the hospital or whatever. It can be used in everyday life. I just really like that about that, being a dietitian. Challenges and stressors. So I've touched upon this a little bit. We are definitely stretched thin, especially in rural areas. So ideally, Rosetown would have like a full-time dietitian. And maybe I'm a little bit biased, but I really do think that. Bigger could have a full-time dietitian. Maybe not Elrose and Kyle because they don't have like the acute care, like the inpatient side of the hospital, but we are just definitely stretched thin. I mentioned screening at the beginning of the presentation, and basically I see people who I am referred to, and a lot of the times I don't even get to everyone who I'm referred to. So that is definitely a challenge because there's a lot of the times your coworkers are constantly like, you contacted so-and-so, and it's like, no, I have not. And he's like 10th on my list, and it's really hard to like fit in that. I've definitely learned over the years to kind of like not take it personally and not think that I was doing a bad job, but just basically mandates aren't met. Like there's mandates in Saskatchewan that dietitians are supposed to see a resident in long-term care X amount of times per month, and like we nowhere near meeting that. Screening would be ideal, where basically screening is making sure no one's falling through the cracks. So we, get a prep, the word am I looking for? Like webinars are sent to us about like how to screen properly. And, it's like, that would be great if I could screen, but I'm only seeing people that I'm like referred to, and they're like the top priority people. But it would be great if I could, if you're screening for people who are losing weight in long-term care or like blood sugar control or things like that, it would be great to just, if had some time and just were able to really make sure that no one was missed, any red flags, and that's just never happens in my job. Another challenge, I guess, is just nutrition in general. A lot of in it, especially the online space. So I feel like probably every day I am like trying to tell someone that thing that they read on Facebook that was shared by their grandma is not actually true, and there's a lot of misinformation out there, and that actually affects like all aspects of dietitian roles. So like there's a lot of misconceptions with like cancer, and then the oncology dietitian.
We're losing the voice again.
Oh shoot. Okay, I'll try and stay close. There's a lot of misinformation out there. And so it's just really challenging because even after, even my dad is like, he's not any better, but I will say, like I'll tell him like there's no research on that, it's actually false, and I still think he goes away with not actually believing me. So that's a challenge for sure. So salary, it definitely depends on whether you are like within the health authority, private practice, or working for a nonprofit organization. So I don't think I mentioned that, but Bridgepoint actually is a nonprofit organization. So my pay is actually different, and it is less than what I make at my Sask Health Authority job. But the Saskatchewan Health Authority is a provincial-wide pay scale, and everyone's paid the same, and it's actually a 5-step. I've had a typo in there. Pay range, and it caps at the first 5th step. And so in general, kind of what I like was in doing my research, it's about like 60 to 83,000 a year. And so, yeah, I kind of mentioned this in other slide, I believe, but we aren't paid like super, super high or that well, but it's kind of like a price that I would say I pay because I mentioned it in like the work-life balance. It's like there's a great work-life balance with this job. So that's just something that kind of the price I pay is because I can take off time when I need. And it's, yeah, that's just kind of how I see it. Yes, benefits, most places, nonprofits, because Bridgepoint actually doesn't have benefits, but my Sask Health Authority does. Nonprofit does work a little bit differently, but the Sask Health Authority, like the majority of dietitian jobs in the province, do have benefits that cover dental, eye care, and just general health, which is obviously super important. Like I have 4 little kids, and yeah, things definitely add up. And so it's really nice to have that coverage. And I do have a pension plan with both Saskatchewan Health Authority and Bridgepoint. They are different. So I can't remember what percent, but yeah, that's really a benefit to the job as well. So education requirements. So in order to be a dietitian, you do actually have to have a bachelor degree. So it's a Bachelor of Science in Nutrition. And it is a protected title. So when I mentioned at the beginning that it is different than a nutritionist, so anyone can call themselves a nutritionist. You can essentially take a one-day course on the internet and call yourself a nutritionist, but it's actually not allowed to, you cannot call yourself a dietitian unless you actually go through the steps in becoming one. So it's kind of nice that it's protected across Canada. So you do get your degree and then go through an 8-month internship, which I think most universities now across Canada, the internship is included in the programming, where before it was super competitive and you took your 3-year schooling and then you had to apply for an internship and you weren't always guaranteed to get one. So it's super nice that it's just included in the schooling. And then after your 8-month internship, then you just write your national board exam. And then if you pass it, then you can call yourself a registered dietitian. Bachelor degrees are adequate for all positions in Saskatchewan. There are provinces, I can't remember which ones in Canada, that their public health jobs, they require a master's, but in Saskatchewan public health, you just need a bachelor's. Kind of nice that, yeah, you can basically apply for all dietitian jobs in Saskatchewan with just a bachelor degree. And then extra certifications are preferred in a lot of jobs. So like certified diabetes educators or certified eating disorder registered dietitians. Sometimes jobs will require that for you to be able to work for them. And then continuing education yearly monitored by the Saskatchewan Dietitian Association. So every year, which is coming up, I was doing that. I'm like, ooh, that's March 31st. It's coming up. Every year on March 31st, we have to set out goals and then we have to work on those goals and then complete them. And then it's all monitored and we can be audited to make sure that we're actually doing what we're doing. And so it's, yeah, and that the Saskatchewan Dietitian Association is really good for kind of making sure that all dietitians are like practicing ethically and appropriately. So my journey, I've mentioned a lot of this stuff kind of already, but I did graduate from RCHS. Didn't probably need to put the year, but in 2007, attended the U of S Arts and Science. So I just began taking basic classes and prerequisites. And then I've always had an interest in healthcare. My sister was going to nursing in Calgary. And I always knew that I wanted to work in healthcare. But I faint at the sight of blood and needles, so I knew I could never be a nurse. So I kind of just went through some options on like an online quiz, I think. I don't even remember what it was, but I started learning kind of what a dietitian does. And then years ago, like I was probably in grade 9, maybe actually Bridgepoint, presented to our school, and it always kind of stuck in my head like, oh, I would really like to work in eating disorder. I didn't really specifically think dietitian at that time, but I've always had an interest in working in eating disorders. So those two kind of combined to help my decision in applying for the nutrition program. So it is a 5-year program because it's 1 year of prerequisites and then a 4-year program. And just because, well, for one, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And then I avoided all chemistry classes. And so when I finally decided on being a dietitian, I didn't have any chemistry classes. I had to then take my 2nd year of prerequisites to make sure I had everything. So I did it in 6 years. Rather than 5. I graduated in 2013 and happened to be a year of a hiring freeze in the health authority. So they were hiring no positions. So no one got a health region job right away. And we were all kind of scrambling, but Bridgepoint happened to hire me in 2013. And then the former Heartland Health Region in 2014, I began working with them. And I didn't get a permanent position right away. That's very common, I guess, in healthcare in general, I think, and especially with dietetics. So I had to fill like maternity leaves and temporary positions until I finally accepted a permanent role. And I cannot remember when I accepted that permanent role. Started in 2014, and I want to say it was probably at least till 2017 or 18 until I actually got a permanent role. And then just because of rural settings, I just wanted to mention that that is kind of, I guess, the reason why I ended up in Rosetown working for the hospitals, because if I wanted to be a dietitian here, that was my option. My dream job was kind of my 2 dream jobs were being an ICU dietitian and the eating disorder place. And so obviously I had to give up the ICU dietitian unless I wanted to commute, which would have been okay too. But I was just happy to work at the eating disorder facility that's only 30 minutes away. And then my areas of passion just always continued to be eating disorder recovery and support. And then I really had an interest in toddler and nutrition, specifically kind of like preventing picky eating. There isn't necessarily any courses that you can take that you become like specialized in that area. And then diabetes has always kind of been an interest for me. So that did actually lead me to, I couldn't call myself a certified diabetes educator for this presentation because of my mat leaves, my certificate expired. So I do have to renew that. But I did have it for like 5 or 6 years, just being an educator. And I'm in the process of becoming an eating disorder registered dietitian. So the certificate for eating disorders, but it's a quite lengthy process for that. Opportunities. So that's one good thing about the job. Basically, anywhere that there's like a health center, there's going to be a dietitian job. Obviously, in the cities, there's lots of positions available, lots of hospitals, and the units kind of each specifically have one, but in rural, obviously there's less, so you're going to have to be commuting or traveling. And so, but there's also lots of options for private practice. So kind of being like your own boss. Nutrition is very hot topic. So there's lots of interest for private practice. Social media opportunities. So, I mean, when we were talking about income, private practice definitely is essentially not really capped, or I guess it's like unlimited. And I found it interesting that I read actually that 2024 will bring 7 billion or more to the influencer and content creator space. So if you type in like in Instagram, if you type in dietitian, like there's so many dietitians that kind of work through social media. And it's I think if you have a niche and it's kind of like a topic of interest, which I think food and nutrition definitely is, And if you're willing to kind of put in the work and maybe put in a little bit of risk, there's definitely opportunities there. There's a dietitian that I follow actually, and she's very transparent with the amount of money she makes, and it is a lot more than what I make. So there's lots of opportunities there. Brands are definitely wanting to work with content creators, and yeah. Most healthcare positions have opportunities for advancement. So most healthcare positions, like I am a dietitian, and then I'll have like manager kind of above me. And actually currently right now, my manager, who is essentially my boss, is a who we kind of went to school together. So that's kind of neat. Opportunities to travel in the eating disorder field. So because not a lot of eating disorder groups, and in order to network basically in that area, you have to travel. So that's kind of been a cool opportunity. Is I've traveled to Vancouver, I've been to Florida with conferences with eating disorders. So yeah. I just added this slide really quickly. I won't spend a lot of time, but just basically explaining that like these are kind of all the areas that I have classmates and colleagues that are working as dietitians kind of in these specific topics. Like it kind of, like I said, if somebody eats or if there's food, there's kind of an opportunity for there to be a dietitian there. And then work-life balance. So this is kind of what I was mentioning before. We definitely have, I would say, a good work-life balance. My sister is a nurse, and sometimes I have to kind of watch what I say, because when she says that she's going to be home at a certain time and she's not, and her shifts are very long, and we're complaining about having to make supper or something, I'm like, okay, I better my mouth. So we are not an emergency service. So that's basically meaning that like if I can't come into work that day, I don't necessarily need to like fill my position. That is changing a little bit in the province. I think they're starting to do like more on-call dietitians and working on the weekends, but for the most part, in general, you know, we get our holidays off. We don't need to cover over Christmas. Any like stat holidays, like we're not working. In general, we kind of have like office hours, Monday to Friday, 8 to 4:30, and they're shorter daily shifts. So I mean, sometimes people want to work more than 7.5 hours in a day, but I just think that that's really good. I can like get my kids off to school, I can work, I can get home and still have a good time to like make supper. And so I personally like the shorter hours a day, and it's generally kind of like, yeah, it's, I don't stress a lot at my job. I can kind of, you know, keep my work at work, and that's what I was kind of explaining, that that's kind of just what I see as like a price we pay for just a little bit less of our salaries being a little bit less, is just because we get time off for sure, if that makes sense. And that's kind of what I had, I guess. Any questions?
Yes, Janine.
Hopefully I covered everything. I'd have forgotten something.
You covered lots. I was trying to write down questions. No, then she covered it.
Oh.
I did have a question though. One question came up that I thought of too, like food research. Like, is that a dietitian? Do dietitians have any roles in any of that ever?
Yes, like I would say not a lot. Like when I was in my internship, there was like one a dietitian that was like a research dietitian in Regina.
I can't hardly hear you. Sorry, Janine.
Oh, sorry. When I was in my internship in Regina, we kind of had like, Regina had like one research dietitian, and maybe Saskatchewan kind of had like one. So not a lot, but definitely an area that you can work in. Yeah.
Some companies were hiring new dietitians as part of their research team. I didn't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this online, like, that's always a concern, I think, online for anything, like whether it's nutrition, politics,
Yeah.
vaccinations. I mean, there's all kinds of information online, some good, some bad. So you guys battle that quite a bit, you think? Like people are self-teaching themselves but aren't really sure how they're doing it?
Yeah, I would say every single day I read this online and they bring their papers in and
Can't hear you.
oh, sorry. I don't know.
I don't know where I don't know where the mic is on your side.
I was gonna say I don't know where my mic is, so I just yeah, I would say every day I have to have conversations about yeah, things they read on the internet or shared on Facebook or there's a lot of, you know, I always say that dietitians, like I used to say that we were research based, but I've started to kind of shift my I started saying that we're evidence based actually, because research, you can find research for anything if you want to find it. You just Google it and there's a study that pops up, but that doesn't mean that the evidence is pointed in that direction. So there's lots of, yeah, there's lots of things that you see. It's like, well, I read a study about rats and they got cancer. And it's like, well, one, we're not rats. And two, there was 10 of them. And that's not really applicable to humans and in general population. So yeah, every day I battle that.
I think that's unfortunate, but yeah, that's
yes, yeah.
That's for sure. Mark,
I did actually have one question, Janine. You being the person in your area, you have quite a large area. But if we think about Saskatchewan in terms of provincial jurisdictions, do you know how many dietitians, registered dietitians there are in Saskatchewan? And do you guys collaborate a lot?
I don't know the number. I remember reading it once. I almost like don't even want to guess. It's like, I'm pretty sure there's less than 500. And so, but we do collaborate actually. Like, I mean, we have like, can't remember the title of it, community dietitians. It's the card. I don't remember what it stands for, but like we'll have meetings every couple months, and then we have dietitians that work specifically in long-term care that we have monthly meetings with. So we do collaborate, I'd say, pretty well. It's just my problem for me personally is I know those meetings are on, I have them in my calendar, but like I have a tube feed patient that needs to be seen and it just gets axed off my calendar. So I very rarely attend the meetings, and that's not a good thing, but that's just the way my day goes. Yeah. And we have Facebook support groups, which, I mean, I know Facebook kind of sounds funny, but we have a Canadian-wide support group on Facebook for dietitians and a Saskatchewan one too. So if we ever have like a complicated patient that we're not sure what to deal with, or if we hear of a product shortage, then we just basically connect through Facebook, which is actually very good.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I don't have any more questions. I don't know if Fantasia has any or not. I haven't heard. But just my own little story, Janine, it was probably just before you became a dietitian. I know you talked about, someone being diagnosed and overwhelmed. That's exactly what happened with my wife when she was diagnosed with celiac. And I tell you that her visit to the dietitian was such a relief. It just took the stress off of her and me as well, both being new to the disease. And now some 10, 11 years later, she's coping, living with the disease. And really, it's exactly as you said, the doctor, here's the diagnosis, don't have a whole bunch of time to see you. The only thing the doctor said that really, see a dietitian. So she did.
Yeah.
That's where the relief and the stress relief really came in. So you guys do a great job. So appreciate all you do.
Good to hear. And honestly, like a lot of the times the problem is the doctor sees you and then you can't get in to see a dietitian for a few weeks. So then you're just hanging out like, I don't know what to eat. Like I have so many people that come in to see me and they're like, I cut out this, I cut out that, I cut out this. It's like, well, you're going to reintroduce all of that. But yes, it's like, I feel bad for you that you had no idea what to do.
Yeah, it takes time sometimes, but as long as they get to you, that's the main thing. People.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Your resources, that's for sure. Well, anyways, I don't think I have anything else. So, Mark, okay.
No, just thank you, Janine, for offering to do this for us. We really appreciate your expertise.
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.